Welcome back, Hunters, to another Evasion series video. Scorned Magnamalo is one of the most terrifying fights in Monster Hunter Rise, adding a couple of new moves to the regular Magnamalo. Now, I've already done an Evasion series video on regular HR Magnamalo, so this video is going to focus on the new skills added to Scorned specifically, but we'll also highlight some of the moves that were altered from HR to MR. I'll leave a link in the description below or the card at the end of this video to link to the original Magnamalo breakdown if you need it. One last thing before we get started. If this video or any of the other videos on my channel have helped you or your friends out, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So without further ado, let's grab a wire bug and head on out. So we'll start with some key minor differences. Generally speaking, compared to regular Magnamalo, MR Magnamalo and Scorned both like to reposition a lot more. They are a little bit more active and will do kind of like a run around to kind of get different angles on you before launching any attacks. With the runarounds as well, Magnamalo likes to release some Hellfire balls just to kind of distract you as he does. A major difference for Scorn here is that he is always in pink Hellfire mode. MR Magnamalo builds up from nothing to purple to pink just like HR, but Scorn immediately starts at pink, so you gotta be aware that from the start, his attacks are gonna hurt massively more. Most of his attacks will also have Hellfire follow-up explosions, including the claw smashes, tail smashes, and ground swipes. Another note about Scorned is that he actually takes a little bit longer to enrage than most monsters. You cannot immediately start damaging him from the start of a hunt and push him to enrage. He's actually very tame at the start and takes quite a bit of damage before his blades on the side of his arms finally emerge. Once the blades on his arms emerge, all the damage from then on start to add up and quickly push him into an enraged state. So just something to note here, if you're using Agitator or any other skills that rely on an enraged state, it's going to take a little bit longer into the hunt before you can actually get those benefits. Now, upon starting any hunt with Scorned Magnamalo, I'm sure you guys have already noticed, but he starts out with the regular Magnamalo's ultimate attack, right off the start. I have talked about how to maneuver this attack in my previous video, but I'll do a summary here as well. The ultimate attack is a two-step attack, number one where he charges running straight at you, then he loops around and gets back to his starting position, jumps in the air, and then smashes straight towards you. It is a pretty difficult attack to evade since he also leaves behind exploding Hellfire clouds during his running path. For the charge attack, backing up or moving to the left is most ideal. He always cuts right to loop back to the starting position before the jumping attack, so if you move left, you'll avoid getting hit by the right cut loop. After that, you have three options. Continuing moving backwards as far possible as you can just to avoid the attack. This works for HR and MR Magnamalo, but for Scorned it might not because he does fly a slightly greater distance than regular. So you'll need to be literally the opposite end of the fighting area, and even then in smaller areas this might not be enough, so you gotta watch your surroundings. The second option is to just keep moving to the left. As you move along, he will eventually lock his position, and if you keep just moving, he's just gonna shoot down and come down right beside you. The third option here is to counter the attack coming down. If you're able to avoid the first charging attack, you have a lot of time to then set up and time your counter appropriately to hit his attack when he comes down towards you. A reminder here as well that if you do get hit by this attack, at any point you'll be sent flying into the air. At this point you only have one option, and that is to wire bug to the sides. Otherwise he's going to hit you with the flying attack and cart you. So that's it for the general notes. Let's take a look at more specific attacks. Scorned is a really cool monster, and one of his new, more prominent features are his blades that extend from his arms. These blades are designed to extend his reach of his claw attacks, specifically two attacks including the claw swipe and the claw smash. Now for both of these, the animation has slightly changed. What you need to be looking for is him raising his arm and then holding it there for a second. It's kind of like a delay before he does either of these two attacks. With the claw swipe, he actually pulls his arm backwards more than upwards. You can see here it's just really reaching backwards, preparing to swing with his body. It's a really short second, kind of like a half second, and then he just like swings across the front. If you do get hit, you won't really be knocked back or anything, but you will take some damage. My recommendation is that you just back up for this attack. Back up, just dodge it because he just attacks right in front of him. I would not recommend countering this attack because he likes to follow it up with multiple different attacks. One of the biggest ones that he will follow it up with is actually the blade smash. Now the indicator for this is very similar to the blade swing in that there is a delay when his arm is up in the air. However, his arm is actually more above his head rather than pulled back, and that's how you know he's going to smash down instead of swinging across his body. The smash always occurs on the same side that the arm is raised, so your best bet for positioning depends on your goal. If you want to attack the head, make sure that you move to the opposite arm and let the arm smash before going for the head. If you just want to attack the blade, you can move to the outside or the inside of the blade, just wait till it smashes down and then go back in for the damage. Unlike the blade swing, he can do the blade smash individually with or without any follow-up to a swing. This attack doesn't have a very long window, so don't commit to any big combos. Just get a little bit of damage, then damage the blades, and over time you'll be able to break them. The next move we have is the Super Punch, which is a single Hellfire charged punch followed by a full body spin. Now Scorned loves this move, let me tell you, he loves this one. This is definitely one of his most frequent attacks, so learning to evade this one is very key. The indicators for this attack is that he takes a half pivot step backwards, lifts one arm up, but then kind of just holds it there getting ready to punch forward. He does have a little bit of a growl, but it's really the hold that's kind of your cue to realize that, oh, it's the super punch because it's taking so long. As soon as you see his claws start to glow, he will immediately punch forward. Because Scorned moves forward with this attack, backing up is not really an option. The punch, and then the full body spin, moves him quite a distance forward, so you have to evade the punch to the left or the right. My recommendation is to move to the side that the arm is raised, because the initial punch actually swings his body and causes a shift to the opposite side, so before doing his spin, he's gonna kinda already be pushed to that side. If you are very close to Scorned Magnamalo when he begins this attack, you can actually roll under the raised arm and you'll be clear. In terms of countering, it'll really depend on your weapon. He does move forward and spins after the punch, so you can counter the punch if you need to, but if your weapon doesn't deal immediate damage, it could be hard to land some damage while he's doing the spin. If you're farther away and he punches towards you, the spin move is a great attack to counter because he's going to take a break after the spin move. Now this skill can also be combined with various other attacks because, as I said, Scorned loves it. Here's an example of him doing the jumping and run attack to kind of like get to another side, and then he follows up with the super punch. This example really shows what that delay looks like when he's combining it with another skill, so it's very obvious to you. If you notice that delay early enough, you'll be prepared for the attack. Alright, up next, another Scorned special, the Super Ground Explosion. Now once in a while, Magnamalo loves to explode the ground beneath your feet. He uses his Hellfire to penetrate through the ground and perpetuate towards you at high speeds, so it basically looks like the ground explodes in a single line all at once. The attack has a very distinct cue, alongside Magnamalo pulling up his arm backwards and kind of then sticking it into the ground. There is a large sort of gust of wind that starts to collect at the back of his arm. The gathering of the wind makes it so that he can burst the Hellfire through the ground almost immediately. Now this attack is a very devastating attack, but it is both counterable and evadable if you react appropriately. Let's change this up and start with countering the skill. The timing of the attack occurs about a half a second after his arm enters the ground completely. He then raises his body upwards and the ground bursts just as he does that. The big issue with this attack is that the ground burst goes pretty far, so if you're anywhere in the middle, it'll actually cover your screen as well and hinder your view. So it's quite startling and can be very difficult to see his body raise up. Thus, you need to kind of just practice countering at the right time, especially for weapons with narrow counter windows like Bow's Dodge Bolt. If you're an audio cue learner, I recommend listening to his roaring. The second before Magnamalo launches this attack, he actually stops roaring. It goes silent. So if you counter right when you hear him stop roaring, you'll counter the attack. It's a very tense and a very quick counter, and it's one of the attacks that's just kind of like, it's really wild, but it's also really sick. So it'll definitely just take some practice to get the counter right, but once you do, it'll be very satisfying. To evade this attack, you have the option to go left or right, but generally speaking, moving to the opposite arm is slightly safer than rolling to the outside of the attacking arm. If you have no choice and you've already started moving towards the outside of the arm, you have to be very careful. It's almost the exact same as countering the attack. You basically need to roll and use the iframe, which, as we all know, is extremely difficult in Rise. The timing of your roll has to be exactly when Scorned's body starts to lift off the ground. Again, it's super hard to time since the ground explodes so quickly, it's very hard to see. So you really just need to get that practice in and get that timing of clicking that roll button just after that delay when his arm goes into the ground. There is a third option if you are really close to him. You can actually roll under and behind the arm that is raised. As long as you get behind it before it smashes down, the ground explosions usually only perpetuate forward, so you'll be safe behind him. Now this attack does follow up other moves of Scorned's attacks, most frequently his super punch attack that I just previously mentioned. If he hits you with this attack at any stage, he's likely to follow up with a super ground explosion if he's enraged. Again, it won't be every super punch that'll follow by this, but if he's enraged, it's way more likely for him to follow up with a ground explosion, so you just need to be ready. There is also one more special case of this attack. It's when he has less than 30% health. When Scorned is that low, he starts to bleed into his Hellfire and it causes a red Hellfire explosion. I'll discuss this attack further on, but I just want to mention here that when he gets to this stage, he becomes more erratic. One of the moves that gets altered is this ground explosion, where he actually performs two, one after another and alternating hands. So throughout the hunt, you will see him use his right hand to perform this attack, but near the end of the battle, he'll do it with the right and then follow up with the left almost immediately. So you have to be prepared. If you move to the right to dodge, you have to move back to the left to get back and dodge the second one. It's an extremely dangerous move and you got to be really quick with your movements here. If you have any movement skills or even a wire bug, just use it to get to the other side to get to safety. Now moving on here, MR and Scorned have a few extra tail attacks as well. The explosive tail stab is a rather simple move that he does when he looks behind him under his arm and tries to stab you. A good indicator of this tail attack is that he likes to take a quick hop to kind of position his tail above you. Then he raises the tail, bends it, before stabbing it down into the ground. The important part to note here is that he looks behind under his raised arm. That's the key indicator that this tail jab is actually the explosive tail stab. Now once he stabs the ground, there are 3 ground explosions that follow suit in the backwards direction behind him. So dodging to the sides is really your best bet. Let the explosions occur before going back in to get some damage. His tail will be stuck in the ground for a second so you can fit some quick damage in. Another tail attack added to the MR is the tail brush attack. Now the tail does the exact same motion as being raised, bent, and then stabs into the ground. The key difference here is that compared to the previous one, he doesn't look under a raised arm, meaning he's preparing to spin his body and tail. This one is slightly different from the ones where he does the 280 spins and brushes the tail around him, which I'll talk about in a moment. After stabbing the ground, he does a 180 spin and then releases Hellfire Clouds. It's not a very hard attack to dodge. If you're close to him, you can just roll through the clouds and get in front of him and you should be safe. Otherwise, just back it up a little bit, let the clouds explode, and then you can go back in for some damage. A final small attack that I want to mention here is the double 180 spin move. Now this move is part of regular Magnamalo's attacks, but I didn't mention it in my previous video, so I thought I'd drop a note here. It's not a very complex attack. He kind of stands on his hind legs for a brief moment before dropping down and spinning in 180 degrees, dragging his tail with him. He does this twice in a row before ending the attack. If you are not close to him, just back it up a little bit and let him finish both spins before going to damage. If you are close to him though, where you want to be is on the inside of the spin, close to his back legs. It's very important that you are close to the back legs because after the 180 spin, his tail swings around and hits the area where his original front arms would have been. If you're not close enough to the back legs, you will get hit by the tail. To avoid the second spin, simply walk under the back legs and cross to the other side. It's important to note here as well that his front arms, when they hop and land back on the ground, they are also a hitbox. So again, do not be close to the front arms at any point in time. Try to get to the back legs or even a little bit under his back legs. You can also go ahead and counter the second spin if you wish, but do keep in mind, he doesn't wait long after this attack and he just moves straight on to the next attack, so you don't have a large window to counter damage. Next up, we have a familiar attack, the Tail Tornado skill. This has an altered version in MR. Instead of one tornado, he does a second follow-up one. Now I've already explained how to maneuver this skill in my previous Magnamalo Evasion series, and you basically need to do the same thing a second time just to avoid the second tornado. The key thing to take away from this is that he actually adjusts his aim for the second tornado attack, so you can't just keep rolling off after the first. It's best to dodge roll to avoid the first one, Keep walking in one direction and then roll again, just as if it's another attack coming at you. It's important that you keep moving in one direction. Even the slightest waver will result in a death like this. Of course, you can also counter the second tornado if your weapon has a fast counter. Countering the first tornado in MR is a little bit more risky because even though he doesn't always use the second tornado, when he's enraged, he's a little bit more likely to follow up with a second tornado, but it's not guaranteed, so it's a little unpredictable to reliably counter the first tornado. This brings us to the final attack that I want to mention here, which is the Scorn specific ultimate skill. The red Hellfire has a special attack and alters the tail tornado attack that I just mentioned. As I mentioned previously, the red Hellfire comes out when Scorn is pretty low health. It comes out at least once when he's 30% health and maybe a second time as well around 15% health. The red Hellfire attack is a special two-step move. The first is that the red fire starts bursting out of his body from all parts of his body as he roars into the sky. This occurs for about 3 seconds, so you have a large window to just get away. After 3 seconds, Scorn slams down and does a full 360 explosion around him, dissipating the red fire. As you can see here, the only real option is just to back away. It's not an instant kill attack, but it will send you flying and knock you back. Step 2 of this is the red Hellfire concentrates in his tail and alters the tail tornado attack. He will try to immediately follow up with the big explosion with this tail tornado attack, but sometimes there might be some delays due to environmental factors, or he might transition or you break apart, something might get in the way. But either way, he will follow up very shortly, and when he does both tornadoes, he will do a third one, which is the special red one. This is a 120 degree attack that he shoots all across in front of him. He will start from either the left or the right, and then do a flaming pan across his front. This attack is counterable if you are in the middle. Timing a good counter is your best bet. If you are really close to him, what you need to do is get behind him. The charge up for the third tornado is a little bit longer than the first two, so you have some time to just get under him and get behind him. A reminder here as well is that when he does the initial tornado attacks, he does take a step back. So after the red Hellfire explosion, your goal should be to get as close to him as possible and stay there. No matter what happens, stay as close to him until he does the tornado attack. If you cannot get close to him, your third option is just back up as far as possible. This attack is pretty much an instant kill, so it's very crucial that you try to avoid it at all costs. And that, hunters, is the main breakdown of Scorned Magnamalo. I hope this helps you guys out. He's a really tough hunt, but a very satisfying hunt as well. I really enjoy this hunt. He really brings out the ferocity and the powerful feel of this flagship monster. And towards the end, you can really just see him struggling and trying to fight you in desperation. It's definitely a very fitting MR100 monster. If you guys have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay safe, be happy, and keep hunting. Sky Sensei is out.